You're good.
Oh. Hello, I'm Penny Myers. I'm one of the tutors for Read to Succeed. What we're going to be talking about today for a while is called phonology. And phonology for me is the study or the structure of our English language. So what we're going to be doing for the next hour or so is going over how our English language fits together. We have two major components in our language. One is called a grapheme. A grapheme is the letter A. It's the name of the letter. The other thing we have in our part of our language is called a phoneme. And when you see a letter with slant sides next to it, that's indicating to you that they want you to produce the sound of that grapheme. So the sound of that letter A, in one sense, is what we call short. It's A. So there's two parts essentially as we start to work on the structure of the English language. One is to figure out or to learn how the graphemes and phonemes work together inside of our language to produce words. Then words in and of themselves, hanging out there alone, don't produce a whole lot. We need to embed words into sentences. That's where we get a lot of the meaning in our language, and that brings us understanding and comprehension. As we work, a little different for us in phonology is we're going to be working with adults. So the difference in phonology with adults, as in young kids like in kindergarten and first grade and third grade and early literacy, is you have to take into consideration the adult kind of psyche. I'm going to take you through the very beginning steps of early phonology for adults, and what we'll try and do with you is teach it in a sequential order so that you know where to start in your lessons. Many of your students, many of your clients will come to you with already having some assessment done by the staff that's inside Read to Succeed. They'll try and give you some information on what literacy level your client's going to be on. Most of the clients that I take are non-readers. They do not read. And so I start at the very beginning of phonology, the sounds of our language, and give them the structure of our language and how the two work together to bring us to meaning and to print. Again, many of you may have clients that went through high school. For whatever reason, they have difficulty in figuring out what the structure of our language is. So there'll be different levels for you to start in. But for my purposes today, I'm going to start you at what we consider in phonology the very beginning. So we're going to start with the very initial sounds. Then we'll work through all the different, I call them categories, how we're going to group our language into kind of some easy categories. Now, the staff at Read to Succeed has given you a handout. I'm pretty sure you have that in front of you. So what I want you to do is to get several things out in front of you, and I'll refer to them as we're working through this lesson. One of the first things that you're going to have is a manual that's called Teaching Adults a Literacy Resource Book. Have that out and put it on the side. I'll refer to it, and when we go through your handout, I'll kind of, if I can, give you page numbers on where you can go to look for additional information that I'm talking about. But I know as you go through your training with Read to Succeed, this is the manual that you're going to be working through. And initially, I'll let you know that the appendices of this manual have a lot of the information that we've culled together today and put in your handout. So just know that at the back of your manual, you have lots of lists of things, of phonological items that you can work with, so you don't have to go out and kind of think them up. The second thing that you need to kind of have in front of you, mine have already been kind of rearranged, and these are called the Wilson Reading System, and they're a set of what we call phonological cards. If you'll get those out now, and while I'm kind of moving around a bit, get them out of the box, get them out in front of you, take the cover page off. I'll give you a little bit of the color coding, and you might want to group them a little bit. One of the first things you're going to see is that we basically have three colors inside your cards. The first color is kind of a sand beige color. That has anything to do with the consonants in our language. If you see anything that's got kind of a peachy, pinky color to it, that has anything to do with the vowel structure in our language. So, and the green part of your cards, you'll have some cards that have green. Those cards have been divided up into categories for both endings and what I call in my phonological study something that's called a glide. It's not important for you to understand what a glide is right now. I just want you to know and to be familiar with how your card system has been put together. Let me initially tell you how I use the Wilson cards in my tutoring sessions. As I said, most of the clients that I have are working at the very beginning level of literacy in phonology. So my cards are always out. You'll notice I'm using a pocket chart today because the cards I use for teaching demonstration are a lot larger. They fit in a pocket chart. So in our language, we've got two kinds of graphemes. Remember, grapheme is the name of the letter. The grapheme here is the letter A. We have two kinds of letter. One kind of letter that we call are all the consonants. The other graphemes that we have are called the vowels. And it's that structure, or how those two graphemes work together, that build the structure of our language. And it's how we learn the roles that they play inside of a word, inside of a sentence, that brings us meaning out of text. I will say that as we learn to study our language, we do not have an easy language to study because of the phonology, because of the sounds in our language. We have, we've got 20 consonants. We have 5 vowels with the 6th one of the Y. You probably remember in elementary school, it's A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. And we'll talk about when that Y plays the role, R-O-L-E, what its job is inside of a word. Sometimes it's a consonant. When a Y sits in front of a word, like yellow, it's a consonant. When Y lives at the end of a word, and sometimes in the middle of the word, it's going to play the role of a vowel. Now, it's that combination, that structure, that makes our language, one, difficult to learn. It's kind of like breaking a code. And when we kind of take you through what I'm going to call some elements or categories of how we're going to take these consonants and vowels and put them into their role inside of a word, that I'm hoping that we can teach our clients what the structure of our language is, and it will help them as adult learners kind of break that code and get to the true beauty of our language, and that's reading comprehension. Or reading text. We call it running text. That's not just a word living by itself. It's a word embedded in a sentence, and from that placement of that word in the sentence, we find out its role in the sentence, and then, generally speaking, we can figure out what it means in that sentence, and that's vocabulary. All right, depending on who you kind of study, if you will, or who you kind of hear from. There'll be several of us that are going to talk to you about phonology. It's not important that, in my particular program that I use for phonology, we talk about 44 sounds. Some programs talk about 42 sounds. It really isn't that important as far as teaching your adult learner. Much of what I'm going to work you through today, the language of it, won't necessarily be the language you would use with your adult learner. It's the language you, as a learner that are going to be a tutor, need to have some foundation in. And once I kind of get into the first couple of categories, I'm going to start to show you what my lesson, the sequence of my lesson, flows like when I'm working with an adult learner. Please understand, my adult learners are at the very beginning part of literacy. They know the alphabet, they know the letters of they know the sounds of the consonants, but that's where it stops. When you start to talk about how the role of the vowels work, then we kind of have breakdowns and meltdowns. And that's what we want to help you with today, is to kind of give you a system, some techniques, some tools for how to pull the roles of both the consonant and the vowels, broken down into their categories, together, so you know how we can figure out this rather complicated language that we live in. I will tell you that if you will turn in your handout to actually page 1. It's a chart, and that's the chart that we're going to work through together. I'm going to walk you down each one of them and tell you that much of this information that's in this chart is also found in your handbook, and as much of it as I can, I'll try and move around and use my chart cards with it and demonstrate it for you and give you a little bit of information. Also understand that those of us that are tutors in Read to Succeed, we have an opportunity to meet together once a month, every other couple of months, in what we call a roundtable discussion. I understand what I'm going to be doing with you today in the next hour or so about phonology on a university level might be taught as a linguistics course, and you could be matriculated for a 3-hour course, which is a semester course. So because you're also very bright and articulate, you're going to get phonology in an hour. So hang on, take good notes, but know that we can meet again and we can slow it down for you. We can go through each one of the categories again slowly and practice each category. But I would like you to see the whole and then the parts. So let's start with some of the parts. The very first part that we're going to talk about is called simple consonants. So if you look at in your handout, and I'm on page 1, I abbreviate on the board. So just get ready. I'm going to talk about simple consonants right now. So if there's simple consonants, then there have to be difficult consonants. The simple consonants are those that tend to be true to themselves. They also are the ones we teach first because we see them most in literature and in books and the resources that you're going to get from the Read to Succeed office. Those simple consonants are B, P, M, W, H, D, T, N, the hard G as in goat, K, and the hard C as in car, Y and F. And remember I told you that Y, it lives both as a consonant and a vowel, but when we put Y at the beginning of a word, like the word yellow, it's considered a consonant. Those letters there we consider simple consonants. The rule that I want to tell you about consonants is, and especially for those of you that are true Southerners bring beauty to pronunciation. You bring an extended pronunciation of a grapheme sometimes. I'm a Midwesterner, so my accent is rather harsh, clipped, and finished. Southerners tend to draw out the sounds a little. So one of the first things we want to listen for and to teach our client is that, for example, the consonant B has the sound of B. It's not B. Now, a Southerner, when they're breaking down individual sounds, all right, if we're working on the simple consonants, and actually the instruction is for all the consonants, look at yourself first, your pronunciation. If you have a Southern accent, you need to be careful if you are working with a client that is in initial literacy stages to make sure that when you pronounce a consonant's sound, remember how I had the sound of, here we go, let's put a letter B up. Remember, if you have the two slanted lines on each side, if you see it, you personally as the tutor see it in your manuals or in your books, or if you get books that are we call a controlled reader, many times you will see these marks around a word. It means they want you to produce the sound of that letter. So the sound of this consonant is B. It is not B. It is not S. It is not D. It's D. So one of the first things that you're going to do with your client, depending on the pre-assessment that you've gotten from Shelley or any of the staff in the Read to Succeed office, is to make sure as you go through all of the consonants that they have a true pronunciation of that consonant. And I'll tell you why that's going to end up as a trouble if we don't establish clean sounds for the consonants, is because some of our consonants have a couple of sounds or they have a couple of graphemes. For example, the consonant F, the sound of that F is f. That's it. It's not F. If I want to build a word, and the word that I am going to build is this word. All right, I have consonant, vowel, consonant. I want to build this word with my client. My client already knows the sounds of all the consonants, and I have taught the first vowel, which is the vowel A. And in this situation, this vowel, our vowels have two sounds. You're going to have a short sound and a long sound. Short sound of A is A, and it's usually found in short words or short parts of words. So in this word, if I'm building a word, like either on my pocket charts or maybe you're using your Wilson cards, and I lay the 3 cards out in front of us on the table, I'll point to the first word, and what I don't want to hear as I build a word is I don't want to hear f-at, because I don't want my reader to be what we used to call in early education a phonemic reader. Phonemic readers don't become adults that read fluently. They get all tied up or tongued up in the pronunciation of the word, so they don't read fluently, so their rate of reading is very slow. And when your rate of reading is very slow, your comprehension is also very slow. So it's a difficult process, and many of our clients who went through the public school system in their first 3 grades got tripped up, possibly, in learning phonology and became laborious translators of sound, which after a while gets boring. They give it up, and there go all the beautiful pieces of children's literature that we have written for them. So as I take the initial consonants, the easy consonants are the consonants I'm going to start with my clients, and 1 vowel at a time. So for example, if I want to teach this word, F-A-T, we start with the initial or first sound of the consonant, and it's f. That's it. F. The vowel sound in this word, because it's a short word, and we'll get into this, how I know that this is going to be a short vowel, is A. Just for demonstration purposes right now, that sound is A. That mark, you don't have to tell your client this. I'm letting you know just so you have kind of a vocabulary background. Those marks are called diacritical marks. And when you open up your dictionary and you look to the word to the right, it'll have all the diacritical marks there. And they're there for a purpose. They help you and I on words that we don't already know by seeing it or hearing it or knowing it in context. They help us pronounce. They tell us the sound. They give us clues for what that letter is going to sound, what that grapheme is going to sound like. So the diacritical mark for a short vowel is what we call a breve. Again, it's not important that your client knows that that little symbol is called a breve. I just think it's informational for you as a tutor. You just file it in your brain someplace. If you ever need it again, you can pull it out. As we're working on producing what this word is, first sound is f, short sound of A is A, and the ending sound is T. Now what we do, what I call, is blend. I'm going to blend these sounds together to produce a word. All right, so this word is fat, fat. All right, that's one of the very first things that I do with my clients in our lessons is I start working with what we call the simple consonants first. Then I move towards the short vowels. Now I'm going to place the short vowels up like 1 at a time because I don't want to fall on the floor again. We're going to talk a little bit about the vowels. But you're still on the chart that is called the Sequence of Training Phonics, page 1 in your handout. We're going to work down those different categories, and I'll try and modulate through each one as we kind of move through them. We have 20 consonants. Out of those 20 consonants, several of them will have one sound, one phoneme that can be produced by different graphemes. For example, you take the letter C. We know that the C has got 2 sounds. The letter C has a hard sound, like in the word cat, and that's when it's followed by the vowel A. But we also know that this grapheme produces two sounds. One sound hard, one sound, as we've called it, soft. The letter C is soft when it is followed by the I, E, or the Y. All right, so that's one of those rules. You probably remember these rules in your spelling books when you were in school and you took the Friday test of 10 words, number your paper 1 to 10. That's where you learned a lot of the phonological rules, and that's what really spelling is. 50% of it are spelling or phonological rules, and 50% of spelling is really good visual memory. That's why we have a discussion on how important is in writing with our clients when we're going to correct their spelling, when it becomes important, first of all, just to get the content of what they want to say down on the paper, and then we'll come back and correct spelling. That's called editing, and we do it in kindergarten, and we will do it with our adult learners. All right, so we know that we have got 20 consonants. You have them listed on page 1. You also have them listed on a chart that's on page 3. So if you can at this time, take page 1 and page 3 and just lay them side by side on your desk, and we'll walk through them together. So if you're looking at page 3, you look down that side, you'll see the 20 consonants and the different ways, like that letter C, that other graphemes can produce the same sound. But there are basically 20 sounds that are produced by our consonants. I work with the simple consonants first, the ones that I just told you about, and they're at the top of your page 1. They are the simple ones because they produce a basic simple sound. Let's move to the short vowels. And the short vowels are A, E, I, O, and U. I'm going to put them up here, catch them before they fall, but I'm going to set them up, then I'm going to come back and so I want to make sure they don't fall on us. Take Y out, that's not A, I, O. And, whoops, ooh, upside down. Here we go. Got it. All right. Okay. Each one of these, the most important thing about our vowels is, remember, we've got two types of graphemes. We've got consonants and we have vowels. And it's how those two elements in our language live together and work together inside words that will eventually give us meaning. We teach the short vowels first. I teach A and E first. I separate E and I because they're close in sound. And once I've taught the first vowel, I'll start to build a lot of words with those first simple consonants and that first vowel, like the F-A-T. Very simple words that are what we call a consonant vowel consonant. It's a short word because the vowel inside consonant vowel consonant words are short. The short sound of a vowel, and I have spent, the young man that I'm working with now, and I've been with him for a couple of years, we never leave short vowels. We stay on short vowel. I will introduce long vowels. I'll introduce, as I'll show you later, diphthongs and vowel teams. That's two vowels that kind of live together. But I'm always coming back to short vowels. Many of our adult learners do not have a very strong retention rate. In other words, they don't hold on to the information really as well as primary learners, kids that are in first, second, and third grade. Our adult learners, you have to remember, will only be with us probably 1 day a week for possibly an hour. Realizing that kindergarten, first and second grade, third grade kids are in school 5 or 6 hours a day, and they probably have 150 or 60 minutes of language arts training every single day. So they are really immersed in our language. Our adults have been away from the classroom. They are not comfortable with the classroom. They are not comfortable with instruction. So things like short vowels, you're never going to leave. You're going to have to come back to them over and over and over again with lots and lots of practice. All right, let's take a look at the short vowels. A is the sound as in a, like in mat, cat, rat. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit when we get down to the bottom of the categories. If you look at the very bottom of your category page, which is page 1, they talk about something called a phonogram. We call it kind of onset and rhyme. Doesn't matter. The easiest way to remember it is what used to be called word families. And with your adult learner, in the very first lesson that you have with them, now I said lesson, not necessarily the very first time you meet with them. The very first time you meet with them may just be a meet and greet. You get to know each other, you talk about where you live, interests, do some goal setting, but before you actually get into, say, your first phonological lesson, you need to have established some trust. There has to be some trust between you. Your learner has had a hard row in literacy, in building literacy. He or she may hold a job, is probably married, has responsibility of a home, family, and kids. There's lots of things going on in their life, and you are possibly a throwback to an experience they didn't particularly care for, and that was school. So spend enough time to develop enough trust so that they will allow you to let phonology back into their lives, because it wasn't a pleasant experience for them probably when they were in school, or they wouldn't be as an adult trying to relearn reading skills now. All right, so the first vowel that I work with is the short A, and that sound is A. And from it, I try and build lots and lots of words. For example, a word family is the at family. That's the rhyme, AT at the end of a word. All I have to do is change out this initial consonant, and I can build lots of words like fat, cat, rat, sat. And they used to even produce reading series that were built all on word families. Got a little confusing, but it's not a bad way with adults, because they can leave their very first phonological lesson with you reading sentences. Because you will teach some what we call sight words, like the word the, all right, and is. All right, I'm going to put a word in here, another word from the same family. The fat cat is flat. That's throwing a blend. I probably shouldn't go. I gotcha. Here we go. I remember this from a book. All right, the fat cat is on the mat. Okay, so I've got three here, here, and here. I have three words that use short A that are part of the at family, and I've built a sentence. All I had to teach was a sight word, the, and is, and here's another and on. Those two, I give you those. And they leave with a sentence. And actually that sentence, even though it's kind of silly, doesn't make a lot of sense, it carries meaning. And the one thing we want our learners to know is that the word by itself, the word fat by itself, carries very little meaning. It depends on what I connect it to. That's where I talked when we were beginning on the role. And by that I mean this kind of role, R-O-L-E. What job is that word, is that letter, that sound going to have inside the word, inside the sentence? That's where we finally get meaning or reading comprehension in this structure of our English language. All right, so the first vowel that I taught in my lesson with my learner was short A, and it carries the sound of ah. Now there are, some of you may even work with what we'll call language disabled adults. We don't do that diagnosis. They may come to us with a diagnosis of a language disability. A type of a language disability is called dyslexia. And in your work with us in Read to Succeed, you'll have some opportunities to learn a little bit about dyslexia. I know on the campus of MTSU they have a dyslexic center. Several of us inside that are tutors have had some background in working with dyslexia. Just understand that as adults, if they are still having the difficulty learning our language in print, there may be other things going on. The reason I bring that up is there are some techniques that we use, and it's called modality teaching. In other words, we do things that use vision and sight and touch and movement to help our clients, again, break that code, kind of learn what the language is about, how it works together. And that's why when I say I teach building a word, again, the word fat, I talk about, and you will see me with my hand, I'll put 3 cards on the table. I'll have them spread apart. so that they can be manipulated on the table. Let me grab a tea. I'm going to use the pocket chart, but I will on the table, and you will use your Wilson cards. You'll use your Wilson cards. But I'll put, if I'm working, these would be your Wilson cards, F, A, T. Have them separated out. I'm going to talk to them about the first position. You and I are going to know that as the initial, the first sound you hear, the first sound that you hear in this word, and I'll have them produce that sound. Then I'll say, what's the vowel sound? I name it. I say the vowel sound, because I'm going to teach them as I'm working with that first vowel that you can't have a word without a vowel. There are no words unless a vowel lives inside that word. An example of that is the letter I. All right, and the letter A. They carry meaning in a sentence, and it's a vowel, and therefore it is a word. But you can't build a word without having a vowel in it. So when I'm building words, I'm always referring to what is the first sound that you hear, produce it for me. What's the vowel sound you hear in the middle position, and what's the final sound that you hear. So we'll produce those out loud like at. And I'll ask them, and I'll slowly bring these together, and this is what I call blending, and we'll say, now let's put all three of those sounds together, and it's what? Fat. Fat. Got it. All right? It seems very simplistic, I'm sure, to you right now, but I want to let you know we're going to go through all these categories, then we're going to go into something that's called syllabication. When our words start to get bigger, and we get parts of words, like basket, rabbit, we start to get 2 parts to words, and there are some words that have 5 and 6 parts to them. Once our clients have learned what's the initial sound, what's the first sound you hear, what's the vowel sound, right in the middle of that sound, what do you hear, and what's the last sound? Continuing with short vowel sounds. We were on the short A, which is the sound of ah. And I believe I was kind of moving into modality teaching. And what I mean by modality teaching for a tutor is that your learner may need to use more than just their eyes and the different and more parts of their brain to learn phonology. And by that I mean when I was showing you how I was building the word fat, F-A-T, and if I had your Wilson cards in front of my client at a desk, I would have my client touch. That's tactile. That's a type of modality. It's a type of learning. Many of our adult learners who may have a disability, and probably being an adult learner has its own disabilities just because they're adults and they've been out of the classroom for so many years and they came out with bad experiences, they need to use more than just listening to you talk to them. So I use what's called some modality techniques, and one of them is touching and movement. So touching and movement in building a word is touching each grapheme or letter and producing its sound. So initial sound, middle sound or vowel sound, and final sound. Also in my lesson, I do a spelling as part of, and we'll go over this as I finish, in a typical lesson with me and my learner, there's a spelling test. And I will have them use their fingers and say, what's the first sound you heard in that word? Don't say it out loud. Think about it in your brain. What's the first sound? And I'll literally put my finger up. That's a modality. It gets them using both their hearing and their sight and a little tactile movement. So different parts of their brains are all working together just to try and get the word fat out. All right? And for many of our learners, this is their initial step where they can build some trust with you and stay with you long enough that we can crack that code for them of our language. The young man I'm with now I've had for 2.5 years. We're still on short vowels, but he now reads running text at about a 4th grade level. Okay, he's 22, graduated from the school system that we're all in or we're a part of. Okay, so When I speak about modality teaching, sometimes you'll see me using my fingers, my hands and stuff. I'm just trying to get my learner to use whatever capacities they have to bring them to an understanding of what this simple word of FAT is. And then I will take and put that word, like I did before, into a sentence so they can understand this word really means nothing until you drop it down into a sentence. We could say something positive, negative, or whatever. All right, second vowel. So that's the vowel A. It is the first vowel that I teach, and I teach it with all of those simple consonants that you've got on that first page that shows the elements and the examples. So in a sequence of order, we teach the easiest first, and then we go to the most difficult. So easiest starting with simple consonants, all of the short vowels. If you're starting with a client that's a primary learner, an early literacy learner, you're talking about the first year you're with them. The only difference is their inherent intelligence level or IQ level. We don't test for that, but after you've spent some time with your client, you will have an idea of how bright, for a better way of saying, what their IQ level might be. And obviously the brighter, the academically brighter they are, the faster they're going to learn. Okay, having said that, let's continue on with the next vowel. I then teach the vowel E. The sound of the short E is eh, like in words yet, get, met, let, and there's a word family for you. Another ET ending. All I do then is change the consonant. That's what they call a phonogram, because the endings, E, T, short E, all I have to do is change the first consonant, L, let, met, sent, rent, let's see, yet, met, okay. I'll stay with those two. But that's an example of, that's what they call in a word the rhyme, the part that's always going to sound the same. It's at the end of the word. By changing the first letter, I get a whole list of words that I can work with. So your client will leave your first lesson or second lesson with 5 or 6 or 7 words they already know. Plus you're going to give them words like the and is and on. So not only do they leave with 5 or 6 words that they know, but they leave with those words embedded into a sentence. Not only do they know 5 or 6 words, they also know 5 or 6 sentences. They can spell every word in the sentence and they can write it. And I guarantee you, for some of our beginning early literate clients, they haven't done this in maybe 15 or 20 years. So within your first phonological lesson, they're going to leave you knowing that, and so they leave with trust, like, this might work. Maybe I can learn to read. All right, and knowing how to read. I will tell you that adult clients are very, very resilient clients. They've been out in the world as an adult, married, children, paying rent, buying a home, working, buying cars, filling out credit applications. Somehow they have the capacity to function in a very literate world, and that takes a lot of resilience to do. That takes a lot of resilience, and it takes a lot of courage for them to come back to the classroom table with you. So that's why in Read to Succeed we spend some time talking about building that trust value. And that each lesson that you have with them, they leave having succeeded in reading. They've succeeded in reading, writing, spelling, and meaning. And that's what words are when you drop them down into a sentence. All right, little philosophical part that goes with phonology. You can't just do phonology without talking about the character of the adult learner. So the short E is the eh sound, like in et, met, sent. I don't do E and I together because their sounds are so close. So I then go to O, and the sound of O is ah. The short sound of O is ah, like in dot, mop, pot, job, cob, sock. And lists of these, again, are for you in the back of your manual, your Teaching Adult in Literacy resource books. All these lists of short O, all the 5 vowels, are already prepared for you. And again, you use your Wilson cards to build words on the desk in front of you. Make sure you sit next to your client instead of across the table, because you're going to be working like you and I are working together now. I work with material in front of me. I have my client to my side, so I can see how they're manipulating the cards in front. So it's much easier if you're working this way, because then your stuff isn't upside down. So the short O is ah, and again, I introduce the sound, then I immediately put that sound into a word. Ah, the ending sound, P is P. So let's go. So first sound, T, op. Now blend it together, and what do you get? You get top. The second thing I do, and you should know by now, is I'm going to drop that word into a sentence with a couple of sight words that I've taught, and then I'm going to have him read that sentence 2 or 3 times, and then I'm going to dictate that sentence back to him and have him write it out, and that's called sentence dictation. So if the word is if the sentence is, the top is hot. How's that? The top is hot. All right, I've taught 2 what we call sight words. And I've told him how many words in that sentence. There are 4 words in that sentence. So on a sheet of paper, write down the number 4. So if we're on a typical sheet of lined paper, I'm going to give what's called sentence dictation right now, after we've read this sentence. So I've taught the phonemic sound of short O. I've put it into a word, blended it together. Now I need to give that word some meaning, so I drop it into a sentence. After we've read this sentence, 3 or 4 times, so it's fluid, then I'm going to do sentence dictation. I'm going to say, how many words in this sentence? Just read it out loud to me. The top is hot. 4 words. All right, on your sheet of paper, put the number 4 in that column, that margin to the left, and let's go. First word. It's a sight word. Put the word down, space between. Now, here's our phonemic word. What's the first sound you hear in that word? And I've got a thumb up. That means mentally I want them thinking about the first sound. What's the middle sound? What's that middle sound? And we know that's a vowel sound. And what's the final sound in that word? Put it down like that. And then finish, and I'll do the same thing on hot and what goes at the end of the sentence. So I have just done a total phonological lesson. First thing I taught was the phonemic vowel skill, the short O. I embedded it in a word. We blended, sounded out that word. They learned initial, middle, and final position. We then dropped that word down into a sentence, and the reason we did that was to give the word meaning, because standing alone is just a list of words. So now we have meaning for that word inside the sentence, and we have what's called comprehension, understanding. That's what reading really is reading. What this is called is running text. Words, 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 not just lists of words. Once he's read, or the client's read that sentence until it's fluid. In other words, it's not read, the top is hot, or it's the top. No, I want it fluid, smooth, and easy. Once we've reached that, then it's time for, in a regular phonological lesson, to do what we call sentence dictation. And I make them again tell me how many words. The top is hot. 4. Put 4 on the paper. You know how many words you've got at the end. I make them double check. If you got 4 words, count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. We have done a complete first phonological lesson, and that's the format for all of the lessons that I do with early learners. And that's the steps in the process. And I'll go through that with you one more time at the end of the lesson today, so that you know what I do first, second, third, and fourth. All right? That's the O vowel. The I vowel sound is I, like in hit, like in rig, like in kid or mig. Again, I'm not going to go through this with every single one of the vowels, but you've seen me do it with A, you've seen me do it with E, O, here's I, and the same process will be with the U vowel, and I won't go into Y as a vowel until much later. We're going to spend, generally speaking, any time I'm with my client and I'm doing a lesson, I'm going to always cover the short vowels, because it really is the backbone. They are the hardest working little letters in our language, and those are the vowels. They do most of the work in learning the structure of our language. So the short I is the sound of I, and on your cards behind it you'll have some samples of words, and in the back, the appendices of your textbook, you'll have more lists. It's the same process. I'll do a consonant, vowel, consonant word, drop it in a sentence, read the sentence, dictate the sentence, and that lesson on the short I will last until we have what's called a fluid reader. In other words, my client will recognize a short I in first a single syllable word, then a multisyllabic word, and it becomes natural. All right? Okay, so the last vowel we're going to talk about is the U, and the sound of short U is like in umbrella. It's what we've done with kids in first and second grade. Give them an umbrella and go up like this. Even the bottom of an umbrella is shaped like a U. So it's the sound of like in mug, tug, thug, all of those words. Okay? All right. As far as your first page in your handout, where we were talking about the different elements of our language. We've covered simple consonants, short vowels, the diacritical mark for a short vowel, which we know is a brev. And it's important to remember those, because when we move into syllabication, we're going to have to mark words. And that's another example of what we call modality teaching, using more than just your eyes and your ears. I want my students, my clients, marking the words, coding their words. And what it does is it puts more creases in your brain. It really is. Some of their brains have flattened out a little bit because they just haven't been used, and you know the more little gray matter and wrinkles you have in your brain, the better your retrieval process is. So when I have them mark and even color code like we're doing on the board, and I'll say, you know, mark it with, let's go now in the word when we do syllabication and put the diacritical marks or mark the sound of that, it helps them remember. And then later, it helps them retrieve, bring it back and remember it, so that when they become a truly literate reader of our language, they have had the techniques to make it happen a little more possibly rapidly for them, depending on the amount of time you can spend with them and depending on their innate intellectual capabilities. That's the best way to kind of say that. Their innate intellectual capabilities and curiosities. All right, going down your list again. We have a list of the more difficult consonants, and that's the third one down, and that's the V, L, Z, S, R, C, Q, X, J, G, and S. A couple of those are a little tricky, only because the C has two sounds. We've talked about that. There's a hard and soft sound, and you will have inside your cards, you'll have a card for the G and the C, and when you're going to have the hard G, which usually followed by the vowel A. When you have the soft G and C, it's usually followed by the vowels I, E, and Y. Others in the more difficult consonants, it's just like the letter V and the letter Z and the letter X. They aren't used as much, and what we want to do with our clients is build as much vocabulary as we can do in the quickest amount of time, so they have usable lists of words that continually start to build their repertoire of words, which means the more words I know, the more reading I can do, more comprehension I'll get, more confidence I build, and maybe I can pass that test at the factory that gets me a better job, which is when you're working with an adult learner. Many times that is the major goal, or to pass a GED or get into adult education, those kinds of things. We'll talk about the GED test a little later. I know they're restructuring it now. Many of your clients, the first time you meet them, they're going to want to set goals, and one of them is the GED. It may not be realistic. If you have someone that's coming in as a primary reader from kindergarten to third grade, it may not be realistic. I never tell a client that. It may not be realistic that within a year or 2 years they're going to be able to go in and sit and take the GED. The GED is a difficult test to take. You need the reading ability of a 12th grader to go in and realize, not for you guys, because I'm talking to some 12th graders right now, but you all The last time you did math was probably 12th grade. I haven't done math in, let's see, I'm not telling you when I graduated from high school, but I haven't done, you know, big math other than subtracting. I haven't done adding and dividing subtractions or fractions in many, 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 many years. So if your client wants to take the GED, they need to understand they're going to have to pass all the content areas. That's science, social studies, math, English. We fall, you and I and our clients will fall into the language arts part. That's basically reading comprehension, reading a text and answering some questions. But they're going to have to read at a 12th grade level in order to even qualify to take the GED. Don't tell them right off the bat, this isn't something that's very realistic. You put it down as a goal, and as you start to build some trust, you'll be able to explain to them that this, you know, I'm talking 5 or 6 months into the tutoring process, they may come upon it on their own that this is not something they're going to be able to do right away. That's why it's so critical for us as teachers to make sure that they leave each lesson with us with success built into them. All right, we've done the more difficult consonants. The next category that we have are called the consonant blends and digraphs. Now, I'm going to do digraphs first. Let me give you, I call them, the digraphs are taught, I teach digraphs after I've taught both just identification and sounds of the simple and the more complex consonants, all the short vowels. Then I introduce digraphs. And these are the digraphs. They're kind of like the H brothers. There's a TH, a CH, an SH, a WH, have I got them all? TH, CH, WH. And we have some 3-letter ones. But the basic ones are TH, CH, SH, and WH. What they have in common, I'm talking to my client now, is they all have H sound. What I tell them is, these are 2 consonants, right? They're 2 consonants, TH, CH, SH, and WH. But they produce, if I had to do this with them, remember how we do the phonological sound? So if I take TH and I put that kind of bracket around it, it means I want the sound of that TH, that digraph. And the sound of that is th, like in that. All right? It's a there's several sounds. The basic one we're going to work with is the TH that is pronounced in like the word thin. So it's voiced and you can feel. If you put your hand in front and you make thin, you can feel the air that comes out. But what I'm producing is how many sounds? I'm producing 1 sound. That's our language. It's another example of how our language is a little difficult. And if they're, what I want my clients to understand when I go into digraphs is if I've got the word thin, and that's a word family right there, because I can change all my consonant structure on the front and get a whole bunch of IN words, right? But right now, and notice this is a consonant. That's considered a consonant. Here's my vowel, and here's the ending consonant. So we've got that pattern, and generally speaking, when there's 1 vowel inside a short little word like that, it's going to be what? It's going to be short. It's going to make that I sound. So this word is thin. Then blend it together, thin. Same process no matter what category of phonological skill that I'm working with. I always want to take those steps of blending, building words and blending them together. This is my symbol for blending them together. I want them to do it with their voice. All right? So the digraphs are 2 consonants, but they produce 1 sound. So I will have many lessons with many words that begin and end with digraphs. For example, the word, let's do this word, because it's in lots of everybody's vocabulary. Here's the word. Now, I will tell you, we haven't done this yet. So just this is a word that I want to show you. I've got a digraph at both the beginning and the end of a word. So I've got ch, ch. The only thing I have to figure out is what's the vowel sound in the middle. I'm going to talk to you about R-controlled vowels in a minute, but right now I just have, this is what I have to figure out. So if I'm talking to a client, I'll say, well, we're doing diagraphs. You know, you got to diagraph the beginning of this word, the end of this word. It's going to start with ch, it's going to end in ch, and I know an R sound, ch, it's got an R. So I'll bet now we start to do a little mental figuring, and that word is church. But when I get to the point of teaching them what we call R-controlled vowels, that'll go very fast. That'll go, and I'm coming to that in a minute with you all. But right now, okay, so one of the other categories that we're talking about on your chart is there are diagraphs. And inside your packet, you will also have, and they'll be the color of kind of blondie colors. There are some 3-letter diagraphs, like SQU, THR, SHR, SPR. I don't teach those until after we have mastered, my client and I have mastered the basic diagraphs. All right, and that's what they are. The CH is ch, the SH is sh, and the W in the word what, like in the word which. There's a word that's got 2 diagraphs in it, one at the beginning, one at the end. So if I'm going to use modality again, I'll say the beginning of this word starts with w. So I know it's not just a W because I put my hand and I can feel it. So it's one of those diagraphs. So they all have H's, so it's going to be the WH. So if the word is which, and I didn't give it to you on the board. I didn't write it out. I want to train your ear a little bit, and I will do this. I will say, okay, let's do some ear training. Here's the word, which. The first sound that you hear, and I've got my thumb up, first sound you hear, that's called what? And my client by this time is going to learn these are diagraphs. These are diagraphs. So it's the WH, eh. You know that's a vowel. Every word's got to have a vowel in it or you can't have the word. So that vowel is that short I, and it ends in what? W, I, ch, ch, ch. You know that. It's the CH. So basically that word, which, even though it's got W-H-I-C-H, even though it looks like this, W-H-I-C-H, it's got how many sounds? 3 sounds. 1, 2, 3. So there's only 3 sounds in that word. It doesn't have 5 sounds. It has 3 sounds. All right? That's part of the difficulty when we keep referring back to breaking the code of the English language. It's a little difficult, and there are always exceptions to the rule. Okay, those are the diagraphs. And again, in the back of your handbook, you will have a list, a vocabulary list of all the diagraphs and plenty of words to work with. Remember again, and I'll repeat this as I go through each one of the categories, is that if I'm working on diagraphs, I still have to work on short vowels. I still have to work on beginning, middle, and ending sounds. I still have to build a word. I have to take that word, put it in a sentence. Then we have to read the sentence fluidly. Then we have to write the sentence. So I have covered all the mental capacities of working with our language, which for our learners is exhausting. It's very, very tiring. And you will learn as you work with an adult towards the end of the hour. I generally work for about an hour and a half. We don't do phonology for the entire hour and a half. We can do 15-minute, 10-minute to 15-minute segments, and I can tell because my learner will start to yawn or my learner will fidget. But if they start to yawn, they are not bored, they are mentally tired. This is very mentally taxing for someone who's been out of school 15, 20 years. Okay, next category was blends. I will tell you that blends are, I'm going to give you an example of a blend. Here are some S blends. There are 6 of them. SK, SC, SM, SN, SP, and ST, all right? A blend, different from a digraph. A blend, again, has 2 consonants, SK, all right? So did our digraphs. But the one thing I told you about the digraph, it produces how much sound? It produces 1 sound. 2 letters together in a digraph produce 1 sound. The difference between a digraph and a blend, listen to the word, it's just blended. They're kind of blended. So you get an SK like in the word skirt. but you can hear, let's see if I can give you a better one, skid. Okay, the word skid. You can hear the S and the K and the ending, the ID. They are mixed. Those two sounds are kind of mixed together. That's why they're called blends. They're blended together. But you still can distinguish each sound. That's the difference between a blend and a digraph. A digraph is two consonants produce one sound. A blend is two consonants that are blended together to produce sound. All right? Same pattern. And there are lots of blends. There are, you have 7 R blends, you have 6 L blends, you have 13 ending blends, and these are some of the beginning blends. Blends can go at the beginning of the word, and they can go at the end of the word. Remember, this is a category. Like we have consonants, vowels, digraphs, blends. These are groupings of what happens with our consonants in our language, okay? All right, so there's the blends, and it's, again, the same pattern. I'll teach it, I'll embed it, we'll write it in a sentence, we'll read that sentence, and then we'll do a sentence dictation. Once I get through the short vowels and probably the digraphs, and you get into blends, your learner can read a lot. There is a lot of print out there with just short vowels, mostly short vowels, and digraphs and blends. Much. If you go home tonight, take a look at any book that you're reading, or some of your children's books or textbooks, and just look at the structure in their words. You're going to see a lot of words that are digraphs and blends. And once our clients can learn those and recognize those, there's a massive amount of text that can be read. And it's just learning to read it comfortably and with confidence that will build our learners. All right. Let's go down to long vowels. There are several ways to get long vowels, and I'm going to show you one way that I do it, and I call my long vowels. The long vowels are the same vowels, A, E, I, O, and U. The difference between a long vowel and short vowel, maybe you remember this from first grade and second grade, so here we go, A, E, I, O, and U. And I know Y is there. We're just not going to cover Y now. It's confusing. So the short vowel is the brev, right? That's the diacritical mark. And we already went through those sounds. That's A, I, O, and U. That's why we don't teach phonology in isolation anymore, because it sounds as if you're babbling or making up nonsense words. We always teach phonology embedded in a word so it doesn't sound so odd coming out of your mouth. If you remember, those of you that are closer to my age, when we first were teaching phonology in kindergarten and first grade, you could walk by a room and hear all these poor little children making these guttural sounds, everybody practicing, you know, the short and it was meaningless, and it gave phonology a pretty bad name, and it was very boring. Hopefully now we've learned with lots of different methodologies that have come down about phonology that it is the root of our language, that some of us just learned it automatically. We don't know how we learned it. It just became a part of who we were. Okay, short vowels, that's the brev sound, that's the sound. Long vowels, the diacritical mark is just the dash, and the easy thing about the long vowels is they say their name. So long A is A, long E is E, long I is I, long O is O, and long U is U. That's the simplest part. So you can start to teach on long vowels. The next part of teaching long vowels is how the categories they're going to fall into. Because when you hit long vowels, if you look at your chart on page 3, you're going to see under long vowels that we have 4 or 5 different ways to produce those sounds. And what I'm going to do with you now is take you to one of those. So if you, in your handout, would go to the page that says Vowel Teams, we're going to show you one way to get long vowels. I call them vowel teams. And we're going to list them for you. If you find it in your handout, and it's really going to be as easy as 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you get that page out, I'm going to list them for you and give you some samples of those words that have vowel teams that live inside of them and show you how we mark them. All right, the very first vowel team is the I team. And a team, it's the I team. All right, and it's in the word like, and it's the I-E. That team. A vowel team is simply two vowels together. Again, you may have heard the rule that when two vowels are together, the first one talks and the second one walks. So the first one talks, second one listens. Well, 60–70% of the time that's true. But again, in our language, there are always the exceptions, and I'll show you some exceptions. We don't teach the exceptions until we get the simplistic part out first. So we teach the easiest vowel teams first, and those that you would see most often in words first, and then teach all those exceptions later. Now, again, you're liable to get a client that is a very literate client, and maybe they're here for Read to Succeed for other purposes, and they're going to go, just like when I was teaching, I always had a kid in my class who knew all the exceptions before they knew anything else. So if I was teaching one thing, there'd be the kid back there and say, well, what about this? And that's the exception. So you may run into some clients that if they do, then chances are they may not need phonology. They may just know it. So let's look at our first vowel team, and that's the vowel team of I-E. By team, I mean the vowel I and the vowel E together, and it's in words like this, pie, and it sounds like long I. So generally speaking, when you have a vowel team, the first vowel in that team will say the name or the sound for that team. Now, what's important as we start to work through the teams and when we move into syllabication and we start to mark words, because it's a team, just like when we were doing the diagraphs, these are two vowels together in a team that produce how many sounds? They produce one sound. The sound in this instance for this I team is I, long I, like in the word pie. So when I say mark the vowels in the word pie, they have to do this. Underline the vowels, because both those vowels produce the sound of that long I in that team. All right? So a vowel team, things that we know about a vowel team, is that one, there's two vowels. Two, usually the first one says its name. And three, U doesn't have a team. Left out. All right? So when I said it's easy as 1, 2, 3, 4, the second one is the A team. This is the I team, here's the A team. And in the A team we have a I and we have a Y. For example, like the word stay and the word like may be. Okay, there's the team, there's the team. And the sound in the AI or AY is the sound of long A, long A. All right? Let me give you a long, let's see, I don't have a long A there. I mean, I don't have an A. Oh, pale. How about that? P-A-I-L. So there's an AI for you. Now, when I list these vowel teams, you'll notice I'm putting a dash. I'm putting a dash in front of the IE. I'm putting a dash in front of the AY. That dash signifies for me and my learner that it comes at the end of a word. So I tell, that's a technique I use, and some phonological programs use, that if there's a dash in front of a team, in front of a letter like CK. Sorry guys, I'm over here. If I do a CK with a dash, it means you find that CK at the end of a word, like back, sack, mac, pack. It's at the end of a word. Okay, so anytime, I should probably put that in red since we're initially learning it. When you and I are working together, or if you're watching my video and you see me make a dash in front of something, it means that team or that phonemic skill comes where? It comes at the end of a word. All right? So the first vowel team is only one, I-E, and it comes where? At the end of a word, always. For our purposes right now, always. The second team is the A team. There are two of them. A-I, like in pale, A-Y with a dash comes at the end of the word, or a part of a word, or a part, or the end of a syllable, because that word's got two parts, right? There's a vowel and there's a vowel. We'll talk about what kind of syllable that is in a minute. But when I say it comes at the end, this is a word, right? So it is at the end of the word. Okay? All right. The next team that we have is the O team. And under the O team, we have OA, we have OW, and we have OE. OE comes at the end of a word, and it produces the long O sound. So this O team is going to make long O. Let me give you some examples. This is like own, right? This is like toe. Okay, this is like soap. So when I say mark the vowels in those three words, I know right away I've got two vowels, so that's a team. So I underline both of them because it takes both those letters to produce that sound. All right? Own, O-W, that's a tricky one because it does have a consonant in there. Toe, T-O-E, long O. Own, long O. All right, so those three are the O vowel teams. Number 4, the last one, is the E vowel team, and there are 4 of them. We have EA, we have EE, we have IE, and we have dash EY. And what did I say about the dash? Comes at the end of the word. This is, and they all make the long E sound. Let me give you some examples of these words. This is like the word see. This is like the word see. This is like the word grief. And the EY one is like in turkey. Okay, so if I say underline the vowels in those words, that's the vowel. You can't just underline one. There's 2 vowels there. And what that does for the learner, because there's 2 vowels, they underline. I'll say, okay, let's take this word, turkey. Find me the vowels. Well, here's a set right here. We don't know about that one yet, but I'll tell you that in a minute. This one we do know about, the EY. I know there's 2 there, so therefore it is a team. When it's a team, this information starts to kick into me. The 2 vowels, the first one usually says its name, and U doesn't have a team. Okay? This is not a vowel team. This is an R control. We'll go there in just a second. So when I say mark the vowels, they've got to underline both of them because they are part of a team. Now give me the diacritical mark. It's a long E, long E, long E, long E. All right, even though this is an I-E, look, the I's in front. There's one of those oddities in our language. And this is what I call vowel teams. Okay? You can find that on your list under SPACE, which is another methodology of phonological teaching. On your chart, they call it a vowel digraph. Doesn't matter, semantic issue. Many programs will also refer to them as a vowel team. In your cards, you'll have them on the cards that are posted and printed as I did them here as vowel teams, and they'll have samples for you on the backs of those cards. Like I carry my sheet around with me so that I make sure I've got a sample of each one of the teams. And again, we go right back then to the typical lesson. If I'm working just on vowel teams, I'll take one team. Like the first one is the IE team. I'll take that one first. and teach everything I can with lots of samples of IE team words first. Put those words into sentences and read sentences fluidly. Do sentence dictation, which is a spelling lesson and a comprehension lesson. So it's the same process no matter which one of the categories that I'm teaching. That's going to embed itself into a phonological lesson. And that lesson generally lasts, the phonology part of the lesson generally lasts 15 minutes. And you can start to feel with your client just how much they can take before they need a break. Okay, next one we have is what's called the vowel diphthongs. And I'll spell that for you so you can see, well, you can see it on your chart. And those are and what's odd about, and we just call them in phonology, it's diphthongs, D-I-P-H, yeah, here we go, D-I-P-H-T, oh, did I spell that right? Diphthongs, D-I-P-H, did I forget an H? Yeah, I did. Okay, you always got to watch me with my spelling. Let me do that better so that looks right, T-H. Next category we're going to talk about are called diphthongs. Here's an example of a grapheme, which is the name of a letter, the letter F, that has multiple sounds. It produces multiple sounds with different graphemes, if you will. So the PH in our list of simple and complex consonants is one of the more complex because this PH is really produced by the grapheme F, like in phone and all, photography and all of that. But the word is diphthong. And a diphthong, you have them listed for you on your chart that's on page 1 in your handout. And let me tell you that the diacritical mark for a diphthong, like let me give you a word, an OI, let me do it this way, OI is a diphthong. They are vowel teams, they're two vowels together, but they have what we call just kind of a unique sound. They kind of have a unique sound. And for example, the OI diphthong, like in the word soil, all right, that's it's a diphthong, it's not a team. All right, because it's not going to be long O or long I, it has its own unique sound, and it gets kind of a halo over it. So now we're up to short vowel diacritical is a smile, long vowel or a long vowel is a dash. We've done vowel teams, doesn't have a particular sound because it'll be long, right? Like an EA. And now we've got diphthongs, and the diacritical mark is like that for a diphthong. We have one more to go. I'm going to put it here so I don't forget. All right, after that. So I'm going to give you the list of the diphthongs, and as I say, in the subsequent pages in your handout, there are plenty lists of words that go. But I'm going to quickly run through each one of my cards and just give you a sample of what of who the diphthongs are and what sounds they produce. Okay, and that's their symbol. So when we go to mark, when I get into syllabication, I say, okay, now mark the vowels. Each vowel gets its own mark. And the reason we do that is because then it tells the reader, how am I supposed to pronounce that mark? Once I get that, then that's something hopefully will be embedded in my brain, and after I get the visual stimulation as an early reader, soon I'll be able to let that go and I'll just remember it. As a side note, if you have a client and you put the word up like this and they say soil, that word soil, forget everything I've said. You don't need to teach them anything. They already know the word. All right? Same thing with short vowels and consonants, the categories we're going through. There will come a time in syllabication, that'll be the second half of what we're going to talk about. You may want to go back and just help them rediscover why they know that soil. All right? But if they know the word, can write it, can put it in a sentence, can read it fluidly and have meaning, I don't spend a whole lot of phonological review on it. My interest with an adult learner is that they learn to read with understanding quickly. quickly enough that in their life, for whatever reason, whether it's a job or job security or home or travel, that's the goal that we're meeting for them. Okay? All right. So there's OI. There's dash OY. So what do we know about OY? We know that it comes at the end of a word. Toy. So that's the sound. Oi. So it's not long O, it's not the Y, it's its own kind of unique sound. Decoy, toy. Here's another one. AW means it comes at the end of the word, like the word saw. And there's the there's the diacritical mark for it. AW. All right, now we've got AU, like in words like fault. F-A-U-L-T. Fault. So if I would give you a list of words and I'd say, now mark the vowels. First thing you'd have to do is underline the vowels. Then you have to decide, is that a vowel team or is that a diphthong? Because if it's a vowel team, probably that's fail. That doesn't make sense. So when people who are learning to read or practicing reading, or even when I read and I find a word that I don't know, I practice some of the things that I do know. So if that's not going to be a long A, then it's got to be a diphthong. It has one of those strange little sounds like fault, aw. Okay? O-O. O-O carries a couple of sounds for us. And one time, we get the sound of look, that's one diphthong. A second diphthong is like in the word boo. So you get and oo. How unique in our language. And how am I going to know the difference? I just need to practice. And sometimes it's the sentence that these words live in that gives us the pronunciation. All right? E-E-W means it comes at the end of the word, right? Like the word few. Okay? I've got EU, and this is rare. This is one of those, here's some of those exceptions, like the word glue. Okay? Okay. I did OW. Here's OW, like in the word how. So that sound is ow. And the word, and the, I did O, did the other one there. I think that's a, and OU, did I do OU? Here's OU. And OU, I thought I did that. Like in the word out. That's the vowel, here's the sound. So we've got ow, oo, oi, aw, all, and oo. Now again, individually and by themselves, it sounds like I'm producing a bunch of nonsense. But it is a category inside of our language that our learners need to know. And the last one I'm going to teach you, then we'll take a break before I go into syllabication, is what we call our controlled vowel. It's a type